Good evening. I am Barbara Levinson, and as a member of the organizing committee, I am very pleased to welcome you to the first event of the 2021 Jewish Book Festival. This is our festival's 23rd year, and the members of our committee, the Jewish Federation, and our very capable leader, Kim Banaji, are thrilled that we continue to bring quality programs to our community. Thank you for being a part of the Jewish Book Festival. Tonight's program would not be possible without the continued support of the Jewish Federation of the San Gabriel and Pomona Valleys, the Jewish Book Council, and the generosity of the Literary Circle. Before I introduce you to this evening's author, please note that you will be able to ask questions after the presentation. To do so, you just go to the question and answer tab at the bottom of your screen and type them in. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce the author, David Page. David may be best known as the creator and producer of diners, drive-ins, and dives, but his love of everything food began when he was a network news producer based overseas. He traveled through Europe, Africa, and the Middle East doing two things: covering some of the biggest stories in the world and developing a passion for some of the world's most incredible food. His food adventures included his first taste of couscous, served by Muammar Gaddafi's kitchen staff while waiting in a tent to interview the dictator in Libya. If that's not exciting enough for you, he also had blood oranges for breakfast with Yasser Arafat, wild boar prosciutto in Rome, and endless caviar in Moscow. After returning to the United States, David was a show producer for Good Morning America. He was involved in a substantial amount of food coverage, including cooking segments for Emeril Lagasse, producing diners, drive-ins, and dives, and Beer Geeks took him deep into the world of American food, its vast variations, and the world of its vast variations, and its history, its evolution, and especially the dedicated cooks and chefs that keep it vibrant. It is those experiences and education and the discovery of little-known stories and facts that led David to dig even deeper and tie the strands together in Food Americana. And now I give you David Page.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and thanks to all of you for the opportunity to chat about some of my favorite things: food, travel, writing, television, and of course, myself. It was late on a Thursday afternoon back in 2006. I was on the phone with an executive from the Food Network pitching show ideas. After decades as a hard news journalist, including long stints at ABC and NBC, covering some of the world's biggest stories, I'd opened my own production company, but no one was buying what I was selling. I'd pitched this executive many times before. She'd rejected every idea I had, and it was happening again. Until she asked me, "Do you have anything about diners?" "Absolutely," I answered. "I'm developing a show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives," and explained the concept to her. To my surprise, she said, "That sounds good. We have a development meeting on Tuesday. Get me a write-up for a 1-hour special by Monday," which was great, except for one problem. You see, I was not developing a program called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. I just pulled the name and the show concept out of thin air. So I spent the weekend calling around the country to anyone who could help me find a half dozen restaurants to include in my show proposal. I submitted it on Monday. The network folks had their meeting on Tuesday, and soon they gave me the green light for a 1-hour special. My first question to them was, "Do you want to talk about potential hosts?" They said, "No, we know who we want to use, Guy Fieri." They told me he just won their next Food Network star competition. Now, I didn't know who Guy Fieri was, or even that there was something called the next Food Network star, because frankly, I didn't watch food television. So I Googled his name, and what came up looked like a cartoon. A spiky haired, bleach blonde man child in shorts and flip flops. My immediate reaction was, I'm screwed. And things didn't get any better when I finally connected with Guy on the phone. As a lifelong Californian, he didn't even know what a diner really was. He'd never been to one, but he would prove to be a quick study. Our first shoot was at the Bayway Diner across from a petroleum refinery in Linden, New Jersey. It was a small, traditional diner, all chrome and red enamel, 8 or 10 seats at the counter, owned by a local firefighter and frequented by a very local crowd. Now, Guy didn't know diners, but he knew how to work a restaurant. So he jumped behind the counter and started helping out, flipping hash browns, serving coffee. Most important, bantering and joking with the customers. To my astonishment, it was TV magic. And again, this wasn't his natural environment. For example, he kept making mafia jokes, cracking that if he messed up his order, they'd find his body later. I called for a brief break in shooting, walked him outside, and explained he was in New Jersey. This is not a topic to joke about here. And I pointed out that at least one guy at the counter was clearly packing a gun. Now, as I said, Guy was a quick study. There were no more mob jokes. We went on to shoot the rest of the special over the next 16 days, and Guy just got better and better. The show ran on the Food Network in the first week of November 2006, and it rated so well that what was supposed to be a one-time special got picked up as a series that is still in production today. I produced the first 11 seasons. They're now in season 30-something. Diners afforded me a deep insider's look at the heart and soul of American food, of the remarkable people, the moms and pops working insane hours 7 days a week, often teetering on the edge of bankruptcy to create real homemade food they care about. People motivated by pleasing others. Like the couple serving mutton barbecue in Lexington, Kentucky, who later told me they were about to declare bankruptcy until being on diners brought in new customers. The third generation owner of a Mexican restaurant in San Diego, who is still making tortillas from scratch, just as her grandfather did 80 years ago. The Texas woman who became a local legend serving goat burgers from a 3-sided shack by a dusty road, with customers waiting in long lines and then sharing communal picnic tables. Food, after all, is the great social lubricant. Meals are where we come together to share, to talk, to experience each other. It's actually something I first began to take notice of even before I created Diners, when I was assigned to work internationally for NBC News. For 6 years or so, I covered Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, first living in London, then Frankfurt, then Budapest, where I opened a bureau to cover the coming fall of communism. Now, I had never expected to get an overseas assignment. All of a sudden, I was going from country I knew nothing about to country I knew nothing about. And I came to realize that food is the gateway to understanding a culture. It's people, history, geography, climate, economics, mindset, what matters to people, how they live their lives. In Paris, the importance of taking time to have a leisurely meal reflects the French attitude toward work-life balance. In Strasbourg, in Eastern France, the signature dish is choucroute, an obviously Germanic plate of sauerkraut topped with sausage or big hunks of pork. It reflects the political turmoil of the region, where control has shifted back and forth between Germany and France for centuries. In Britain, curry is among the most popular foods, a reminder of the UK's colonial past, as is IPA, created because adding hops helped preserve beer on its long voyage to British bureaucrats stationed in India. The so-called national dish of Tuscany is pappardelle cinghiale, egg pasta with a wild boar ragu, and many other Tuscan dishes rely on boar as well, which reflects the region's long tradition of hunting, which itself reflects a long history of poverty, of having to live off the land. In Greece, the meza, the table full of small plates shared by everyone, reflects a culture that prizes community. Ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus said, "We should look for someone to eat and drink with before looking for something to eat and drink. For dining alone is leading the life of a lion or wolf." When my 28-year-old daughter was 8 or 9, she asked me why every time I talked about a place I'd visited, I talked about the food there. Well, because my experiences with food are some of the most memorable of my many years abroad. And in fact, sitting at a table eating their foods with people of other countries, discussing them and so much more with my table mates, provided me with a remarkable education and a seemingly endless trove of incredible memories. Duck in a speckled pot like my grandmother used to cook in, at a small restaurant by the airport in Gdansk, Poland, after interviewing Lech Wałęsa, the dissident who would eventually become Poland's president and win the Nobel Peace Prize. The vice versa from a stand under the elevated train in East Berlin when it was under communist rule, a bright spot in a grim and dark place. Gorging on caprese, the freshest tomatoes, topped with handmade mozzarella, shiny basil, and glistening olive oil in Rome, after a long, exhausting, and vegetable-free stretch in Baghdad just before the First Iraq War. In Istanbul, there was the live eel presented to us for approval before being killed, cooked, and served. And in a dive bar in Moscow, after a few shots of vodka, which helped overcome a major language barrier, talking with another patron, an indigenous Siberian, visiting the big bad city for the first time. Fearful of what he would find there, he brought his own provisions, as he showed me when he opened his flimsy, plastic, Soviet-made briefcase to reveal that it was filled with salted dried fish and offered me some, which I found to be a sweet gesture of friendship, though extremely salty. Having created so many food sense memories, and also having created a hit TV show out of restaurants serving what we Americans love, I found myself asking, does America have a national cuisine? And if so, what is it? I spent 2 years chasing the answers for Food Americana. My conclusions? Yes, there is a uniquely American cuisine. We created it by taking bits and pieces of the cuisines of other countries and cultures, modifying all of them to our tastes and to the availability of ingredients here, and evolving them over time. For example, the beloved bagel. Now, the first written mention of the bagel is from 1610, when the Jewish Council of Krakow, Poland, published a set of regulations for various aspects of daily life. They declared bagels appropriate to be served after a child was born. And by the 19th century, Jewish bakers were selling bagels to both Jews and non-Jews. In the late 1800s, when Jews from Eastern Europe began streaming into America to escape poverty and anti-Semitism, the bagel came with them. By 1900, there were 70 bagel bakeries on the Lower East Side of New York, and a handful in a few other cities with enough Jews to support them. The number of bagels any one bakery could make was limited by just how labor-intensive the process was. The dough had to be mixed by hand, Then each bagel had to be properly shaped, thrown into boiling water, taken out of the water, put in the oven, then at just the right moment, taken out of the oven to cool. It was tough, painstaking work until a guy named Daniel Thompson came along. A junior high shop teacher and an inveterate tinkerer, he actually invented the fold-up, roll-away ping pong table. But he would make a much larger impact on America with his next invention. He worked on it for years. And finally, in 1962, he patented the Thompson automatic bagel making machine, which vastly increased production and speed, making it possible to turn out as many as 4,800 bagels an hour. Then, for 2 years, he unsuccessfully tried to find a bakery willing to use it. Till he found, yes, the Lender brothers, Murray, Marvin, and Sam Lender, who ran one of the first bagel bakeries outside New York City in New Haven, Connecticut. The Lenders leased Thompson's first machine and mated it with another major technological advance, freezing. Frozen foods were just coming into vogue, and the Lenders began freezing their bagels and shipping them to places people had never seen one, with added flavors never seen on the Lower East Side of New York as well, such as raisin and honey. But even as America embraced Lender's bagels, those who'd grown up on the New York original complained they were a pale imitation of the real thing. Not chewy enough or crunchy enough, not bagely enough. Marvin Lender, the last surviving Lender brother, told me, of course they weren't, that mass producing anything changes it. And anyway, they had to appeal to Midwestern tastes. Now, purists blame Thompson's automatic bagel maker for the softening of the bagel, saying it only worked with a watered down dough. Thompson's sons, who now run the company, indignantly deny that. They say their father's machine could handle any dough, but other companies' equipment that mixed it and cut it to feed into the machine could not. And neither could the copycat automatic bagel makers soon produced by their competitors. Still, automation quickly adopted not just by Lenders, but also by a raft of other food companies, unquestionably produced a softer bagel that is now the standard almost everywhere, as is a sweeter taste and a raft of stabilizers and preservatives. The Bagel Revolution the Lenders created is all around us today, from independent bagel shops to bagel chains to fast food joints to grocery stores. Murray Lender calls it the bagelization of America. In this case, the rest of the country embraced what had been only Jewish. But there's a flip side to that story, the saga of Jews and Chinese food. It's a stereotype summed up in that old joke, a Jewish guy and a Chinese guy are talking. The Chinese guy says proudly, our culture is more than 4,000 years old. The Jewish guy says our culture is more than 5,000 years old. The Chinese guy asks, so where did you eat for 1,000 years? But Jewish immigrants really did embrace Chinese food. The Chinese, themselves victimized by racial hate, didn't share the anti-Semitism and racism widespread in the rest of the country. Hence, Chinese restaurants offered a refuge for Jews and African Americans who would often not be welcomed elsewhere. At the same time, and paradoxically, for the families of Jewish immigrants, eating Chinese food was seen as a big step toward fitting in. Sociologist Gay Tuckman, co-author of a seminal academic study on Jews and Chinese food, says it made them feel American. And food that wasn't kosher, like pork and shellfish, was easier to justify when it was diced and hidden among vegetables and sauce, a kind of safe trafe. It was part of a menu created specifically to please the American palate, a process that began shortly after the first Chinese immigrants came to America for the great gold rush of the mid-1800s. Some hoping to find gold, others setting up stores and restaurants to keep the miners supplied and fed. Now, as non-Chinese began sampling the food, the restaurateurs figured out what Americans would eat and what they wouldn't eat, which led initially to a highly controversial dish called chop suey, a combination of stir-fried vegetables and some kind of protein, all covered in a thick brown sauce. Now, some culinary historians claim that chop suey was a fraud, a dish passed off to unsuspecting Americans as Chinese, even though it was invented here out of whole cloth. Others insist it's a modification of a dish made in China, where it featured entrails and offal among the vegetables, instead of the beef, pork, or chicken in the Americanized version. Whatever, it was chop suey and other dishes invented or modified here that would spread across the country. Dishes never eaten in China, such as beef and broccoli, others bearing little relation to the originals, such as General Cho's chicken, created in Taiwan as a Hunan dish, tangy and spicy chicken pieces on the bone, but transformed here into something sticky, sweet, and boneless. Those Americanized dishes are now available at more than 50,000 Chinese American restaurants across the country, more than all the McDonald's, Burger Kings, Wendy's, and KFC's combined. We probably all know someone who will look down his or her nose at a delicious dinner of sweet and sour pork, spare ribs, General Cho's chicken, and perhaps lo mein, whining that it isn't authentic. It isn't what people really eat in China. Well, of course it isn't. It's an evolved cuisine of its own, Chinese American. Then again, what is authentic anyway? Just as food evolves here, it evolves everywhere. One of the most popular dishes in China today is scrambled eggs and tomatoes. Though interestingly, Chinese food as served in China is becoming increasingly available in the US. There are now so many Chinese immigrants here, many of them grad students and professionals, that restaurateurs can actually make a living cooking for them, not for the typical American diner. As I tasted firsthand when I was taken by two young Chinese students to a massive Chinese food hall in Flushing, Queens, a part of New York that is now home to thousands of Chinese immigrants. There, I sampled some incredible dishes you won't find in the average Chinese American restaurants, like dry pot, a highly spicy stir-fried combination made of whatever I chose from a wide assortment of options and priced by weight. I went with beef, fish, tofu, skin, crab, seaweed, tripe, and kidney. I passed on the artery. And it was fabulous, as was the beef tendon in my noodle and soup bowl, my duck soup with gizzard, even the slice of congealed duck blood, which had a uniquely bright flavor and a texture similar to liverwurst. Closer to its origins, but still clearly Americanized, is pizza. That all-American favorite began as a staple food of the poorest of the poor in Naples. When a flood of Southern Italian immigrants came to America in the 1800s, pizza came with them, but not exactly the pizza they made back home. It became Americanized because it had to. Pizza ovens in Naples burned wood. Ovens in New York were larger and burned coal. That meant a longer bake time. And the wheat here had a higher protein content than the wheat that grew around Naples. Combined, those factors resulted in pizza with a crisper, less chewy crust than the pizza in Italy. And soon, what had been the simplest food of the poor began to evolve further. More toppings and variations as pizza slowly trickled out from New York and a handful of other cities with significant Italian populations to the rest of the country. In the 50s and 60s, the trickle became a flood. On the one hand, the growth of national chains played a big part, bringing a uniform style of generic pizza everywhere. But at the same time, local pizzerias were creating regional styles. Today, there are as many as 30 of them, such as St. Louis pizza made with processed Provel cheese, New Haven style, coal-fired and made with clams, the famous trio from Chicago, deep dish stuffed in thin crust, and on and on and on. We all have our favorites. Perhaps more unlikely to have become a part of American cuisine, but it clearly has, is sushi. The top executive at the largest producer of prepackaged sushi in America told me when she was younger and went to grab lunch with her friends, it would be burgers and fries. For her kids today, it's sushi. And that's a perfect example of how I'm defining American cuisine, the foods that are our daily go-tos all across the country. And sushi's now everywhere: convenience stores, supermarkets, college campuses, hospitals, baseball stadiums. At the same time, it's featured at some of the country's most upscale restaurants. At Masa in New York, a sushi dinner is $650 per person. And that's before drinks. The Americanization of sushi began after the Second World War, when a rebuilding Japan began sending business executives to Los Angeles. The first sushi bar there opened in 1964, and others soon followed, all serving a Japanese clientele. But then something remarkable happened. Sushi became hip, trendy, discovered by movie and TV stars, musicians, the beautiful people, the style setters. And it became Americanized. For those who could not stomach raw fish, there was the California roll, which did away with that raw fish entirely, using imitation crab and avocado. And as America's gateway drug to sushi, it opened the door to dozens of different varieties of Americanized sushi rolls, bigger with more ingredients and sauces than were ever used in Japan. In the Oklahoma City suburb of Del City, I even found a sushi chef making fresh sushi rolls inside a gas station. To accommodate local tastes, however, most of the rolls are dropped into the deep fryer. Demand for sushi these days is so high that companies that supply pre-made sushi to retailers have turned to automated production lines called sushi robots to spit out thousands of pieces every day. In fact, though, it wasn't just bagels and sushi. Advances in technology have played a huge role in creating much of American cuisine. Italian immigrant Frank Mastro added a gas line to a coal-fired baker's oven and invented the gas-fired pizza oven. It took up less space than a coal oven, required far less attention from the baker, heated up much more quickly, and had enough interior space to bake multiple pizzas at once. Convinced that pizza could be a very big thing in America, he promoted his new oven heavily, offering buyers financing, detailed instructions on setting up and running a pizzeria, and on making the perfect pie. Between 1938 and 1953, he sold more than 3,000 pizza ovens, playing a huge role in spreading pizza all across America. And it was a simple technological advance, a contraption to hold tortillas that could be dropped into a deep fryer to create crispy taco shells, that allowed Glenn Bell, the man who created Taco Bell in 1962, to turn a version of Mexican food into fast food. It was Taco Bell's expansion throughout the country that first introduced most Americans to some form of Mexican food, and that paved the way for actual Mexican-American restaurants to open in their wake, spreading a limited menu of Mexican-American dishes like Tex-Mex combination plates, fajitas on a sizzling platter, and huge mission burritos created in San Francisco. All of them delicious, in my opinion, but they enraged an Englishwoman named Diana Kennedy, who had moved to Mexico with her husband, the New York Times bureau chief there. She wrote a groundbreaking cookbook, The Cuisines of Mexico, published in 1972, for the first time introducing Americans to the multiple regional cuisines of Mexico. But she did not stop with extolling that food. She went on to excoriate Mexican American food as a terrible bastardization of the real thing. Now, while I think that was unfair, that Mexican American food is a wonderful cuisine of its own, Kennedy did open America up to a whole new universe of Mexican food and inspired many chefs like Rick Bayless, well known today, to cook and promote Mexican dishes as made in the various regions of Mexico. But that launched a whole new debate about appropriation. Critics accused Bayless, not completely fairly, of casting himself, an Anglo, as the ultimate source, the guy who knew the truth of Mexican food, when that role should have been left to Mexican American chefs. It's an argument you'll hear in food circles about a wide range of foods. In fact, the invisibility of those responsible for a food's creation or development is a huge problem. Take a look at barbecue, which is almost entirely the creation of African Americans. It was slaves in the South who created the original recipes, combining Caribbean, Native American, and African techniques and flavorings to slowly cook an entire animal over hot coals. As barbecue became hip in recent years, self-professed foodies began debating the relative talents of pitmasters, almost entirely white men, who became media stars on the mostly white competition circuit, and by opening new haute barbecue restaurants with financing that's often more difficult for African-American pitmasters to obtain. There are exceptions, such as Rodney Scott, who has gotten significant media coverage for his whole hog barbecue restaurants and won the James Beard Award for Best Chef Southeast. At least with more people talking about the situation, maybe it will improve in the future. So what is the future of barbecue? In fact, what is the future of American cuisine? Well, on the barbecue front, we're in the midst of two major changes: an upscaling of barbecue, pitmasters using prime beef, experimenting with new sauces, flavors, and cuts. And we're seeing the regional walls of barbecue breaking down. Not that long ago, to get Memphis ribs, you had to go to Memphis. For Central Texas brisket, you had to go to Central Texas. Increasingly, though, you can find almost any style, almost anywhere. As I said, all cuisines evolve. And American cuisine is evolving in countless ways. A growing number of sushi chefs are now prioritizing the sustainability of the fish they serve. African-American, female, Jewish sushi chef Marissa Baguette in Memphis is using Southern plant ingredients in her sushi rolls, such as okra and collard greens. The artisanal bagel is enjoying a huge resurgence, with bakers all across the country once again making bagels by hand. In Denver, Rosenberg's Bagels and Delicatessen even treats the water they're boiled in to mimic the mineral content of water from New York City, though I've never been convinced that really made a difference. There's a major artisanal pizza movement underway as well, a focus on better ingredients, wood-fired ovens, everything done by hand. At the same time, the technology, from ordering apps to high-tech quick cook ovens, are allowing fast casual pizza chains to adopt the Chipotle model. Walk down the line, choose your ingredients, and get your pizza with fast food speed. And there's something now called Chinese 2.0, a new generation of highly trained chefs evolving Chinese food in America, pushing boundaries, attempting to elevate it to the same status as French or Japanese cuisine. In fact, every element of American cuisine is wonderfully in flux today. And as Americans, especially Gen Z and millennials, are increasingly open to broadening their collective palate, I look forward to our great American cuisine continuing to evolve, perhaps adding dishes from more countries, though it's interesting to consider that the #1 retailer of bagels in America is Dunkin' Donuts. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That was wonderful. We have a whole bunch of questions here that people are asking. Can you see me okay? Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. All right, good. So let me start with a few questions. There's some great questions here. Did any of your interviews depress you as to the state of American food culture? And if they did, why?
No,
And what did you find?
nothing depressed me because I'm a realist about American food culture. It's a
Okay.
wide range, and it includes some of the worst fast food on earth, but we're not defined by fast food. And as I did on Diners and as I did for the book, I find it a joy to come across all of these people who are really, really committed to doing food right, and the patrons who enjoy it. I mean, our coverage of the 2019 Buffalo Chicken Wing Festival. That festival brought out everybody and his brother to revel in having, orange grease rolling down their faces. It was a wonderful day. Or I went to the Memphis in May Barbecue Festival. These are people deeply into food. I met a woman who'd been going there every year for God knows how long. I liked her watch. It was like a barbecue watch. She gave it to me. I couldn't say no. No, I was not depressed.
Oh my goodness.
I know what's out there, and I'm delighted to see, especially the new wave of artisanal cooking that's taking place. I mean, my next book's going to include a chapter on donuts, and I'm hip deep in the world of artisanal donuts right now, and it's an absolute delight.
Okay. I was particularly interested with having spent a lot of time in Oklahoma City.
Aha!
In the in the idea in the idea that anything of interest food wise, you would find anything of interest food wise in Oklahoma City. But
now hold on. I spent a little bit of time at both of the major state universities in Oklahoma, and most of my time I was very young working on a radio station there, but I'm pretty familiar with Oklahoma, and there is some food there that is terrific. For example, chicken fried steak. You can look down your nose at cream gravy, but it's a remarkable American food that frankly, I believe, and I've not studied it, but it seems to me that the lineage of chicken fried steak is Wiener Schnitzel and other similar breaded and fried dishes from Europe. There is the El Reno Onion Burger Festival, where the onion burger is a hamburger that is stretched by being cooked with onions mixed in among the meat. And it was invented during a period of poverty in Oklahoma. Oh, it's the fire alarm. Because it was one of the ways to stretch meat. That's terrific. And of course, look, the Stockyard Steakhouse across from, the Cattleman Steakhouse across from the Stockyards is pretty great steak. So you can find good food in any place. And by the way, if you don't want your sushi roll thrown in the deep fryer, the chef at this sushi bar in the gas station across from the Walmart in Del City does pretty nice basic sushi. So don't go talking down Oklahoma, boomer sooner.
Okay. I lived there for a couple of years, but
as did I.
Okay. Do you think that the pandemic has made people appreciate authentic cooking more, and has it affected the restaurants and chefs that you interviewed?
It's an interesting question. I don't know that it has made people appreciate authentic cooking. It has made people appreciate the ability to get food, and I'm not being like sarcastic here. It's changed the industry by putting a vast emphasis on takeout, curbside, on not eating in the restaurant. it has actually helped the growth of ghost kitchens, which are restaurants that have no bricks and mortar, that you can run 5 restaurant ghost kitchens out of the same commercial kitchen. And while that may be terrific for those of us sitting on the couch, watching Succession and ordering out, it's certainly not good for people who would like to make their living in the restaurant business. I think the reality is the pandemic, to a great extent, sent Americans back to the most traditional comfort foods like hamburgers and certainly pizza. Pizza, especially because you can order it for delivery. I do know that everything about the pandemic is terrible, so I'm not going to say one thing is worse than another, but among the terrible happenings beyond, human life, is the number of restaurants, presumably mostly mom and pops, that have been forced out of business by the pandemic. I mean, more than 100,000 restaurants closed their doors, and that's probably a very conservative number. So I would beg you, if there are mom and pops in your town, don't go to Chili's or Applebee's. I'm sorry. Go to the mom and pop.
Which I do anyhow. Okay, here's an interesting question that I would like to know the answer to. Can you suggest, are you familiar with restaurants in the Los Angeles or Southern California area? And do you have any favorites?
You know what? I'm not really LA conversant, other than to know that you have at this point probably the best collection of Jewish delicatessens anywhere in America, even though some of them have closed. I mean, the New York Times did a piece within the last year declaring LA the best deli city in America, and I'm surprised the building is still standing.
The Lenders?
Lenders? No. I'm surprised the New York Times building is still standing. No, you have Langers, you have all those wonderful delis.
I didn't mean Lenders, I meant Langers, and because it's right in the middle of a very difficult area in Los Angeles, but it survives.
Yeah, and there's the delis in LA that are doing it right, making pastrami from scratch, making bagels from scratch. And there's kind of an upscaling that's going on with a lot of Jewish food, which is, and I think you've got some of this in LA, delis taking your basic bagels and lox and adding gravlax or caviar. There's a lot of room to play on that palette. Though personally, as an East Coast guy, I just as soon go into Russ and Daughters on the Lower East Side and get my basic bagel, lox, and cream.
Okay. What impressed or surprised you the most about the people that you met? And have you kept in touch with any of them?
I've kept in touch with a lot of them, and nothing really surprised me, because remember, I'm pretty conversant with how wonderful the world of restaurant people is. The surprise, well, not really with that book, but with my next one, is I've had some difficulty getting academics to want to share their work lately, but that may just be a passing fad. No, I met some terrific people. I got to speak to Cecilia Chang in the last year of her life, and she pretty much defined the new direction of Chinese food in America when she opened the Mandarin in 1960. And it was kind of a comedy of errors. I was in San Francisco. My wife and I did a trip there to kind of do a multiplicity of book-related events. I went to Tony Geminiani's Pizza School. We went to 8 Tables, one of these Chinese 2.0 restaurants where dinner's $1,000 a person, but we were comped. Yeah. And I got to meet Cecilia Chang, and I showed up at her apartment building, and there had been some miscommunication. She didn't think I was coming on this day. She was going to have to go out for lunch soon, but she was great. First of all, she was classy as hell. I mean, this 100-year-old woman is wearing like black slacks and a gray $8 million sweater and pearls. And she graciously invited me into her apartment. And at one point, we were talking about the restaurant, and she went into the other room and came back with a manila envelope. And she pulled out of it one of the original working menus for the Mandarin with, in blue ballpoint pen, things stricken out and other things written in. It was a remarkable experience, and I got to talk with a lot of, I don't want to diminish the importance of speaking to everyday folks, because I love that it's what I live for. But in the course of doing this, I got to speak to Ruth Reichel. I got to speak to Mel Brooks about lox and bagels. I got to speak to Alice Waters. It was a really nice opportunity doing what I hope is entertaining, but at its heart is importantly accurate. This look at how trends were created. I mean, I talked to Alice Waters not about farm to table in general, but about how she pretty much kicked off the gourmet pizza movement. And it was when she started doing it, then Wolfgang Puck came to her restaurant, saw what she was doing. He bought the same pizza oven. Turned out that the one that she had bought, that he then bought, wasn't that good, so they both had to replace. But the point is, the whole, I got to talk to her about creating a genre of American food, which was a lot of fun.
Okay, let's see. What was your least favorite food? And are there any trends that simply boggle your mind?
Trends that boggle my mind? No, that's mostly in the beverage area.
Okay.
I think what's happening with added benefit beverages and, beverages with enough caffeine to make your pants explode, I'm not a fan. I think that's ridiculous. Did I eat anything I didn't like? No, but
Just least favorite, maybe, not
my least
necessarily.
favorite thing was probably the tendon in the soup that I ordered at that Chinese food hall. Because while it tasted great, one difference between Americans, Westerners in general, and the Chinese, and probably to a broader extent other Asian cultures, but that's beyond my knowledge, is that we only really go for flavor. They go for texture. And there needs to be a variety of textures in a meal. And there are many textures that we don't particularly like as Americans. So was probably that, although I will tell you the flavors of everything I had there were fabulous. I'll tell you a story. My wife and daughter and I were in Hong Kong. As a culture, our reticence to eat offal is pretty well known and considered kind of stupid by the rest of the world. But we wanted to go to a true working man's restaurant. We didn't want to go to a tourist place. And we finally got a recommendation. We go in, we go downstairs. It's this huge place, communal tables. We appear to be the only non-Chinese there. And it's like a dim sum parlor. Servers are walking around with woven baskets, and everything's terrific. And we're pointing because there's no common language. And then I point to one particular basket, and an old man at the table to the right of us, who hadn't said a word to us and I didn't think was aware of our existence, pipes up, grabs me by the shoulder and says, "That's not for you."
I knew you were going to say that.
Of course, I had to try it. It was duck foot, chewy, not a lot of flavor, but hey, I ate it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I don't know what our time is like here. Do you have any comment about so-called healthy eating?
Well, I think most is an unfair word. I think an awful lot of what people do that they think is healthy eating isn't. They're buying processed products that may or may not be better for them or the environment, like meat substitutes. They are highly processed, and there's been no transparency about how they're made, so no one knows what their carbon footprint is. Is it, I will say this, as someone who, as you can tell, although the camera's cutting me off before my gut, I like to eat. I desperately want people to eat real food. Now, if that came out of Michael Pollan's mouth, it would be a health thing. Coming out of my mouth, it's why waste your time on garbage? I whatever it is, roast your own chicken. You know, we were short on time today. My wife worked late. I was trying to get a lot of work done before doing this. I still had the 10 minutes necessary
Oh, sure.
to dice up some vegetables, throw some salt, pepper, and cumin on a chicken, throw it in a pot, add some stock, and put it in the oven. That's a hell of a lot better than some alternative that has been injected with brine, blah, 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 blah. Yes. Would it be great for all of us to eat more healthfully? Yes. From my perspective, that is more about basic choices of food you make at home. Look, I have a hard time believing that I'm going to drop dead a lot earlier if the vegetables I ate had some pesticide on them. Organic, fine. The word natural when it's on a product is absolutely legally meaningless. When they tell you something is natural, this plastic cup is natural. It's natural plastic. There's a lot of use of words that don't really apply. And the big thing that's going on now, especially in the snack food industry, is the alleged adding of additives that are good for you, probiotics and this and that. There's an ice cream brand that claims to hide vegetables in among the ice cream, so your kids will get some vegetables without knowing it.
Why not just eat vegetables?
Well, yeah. Well, there's another ice cream called Nightshade that is being sold because, get this benefit, if you eat it before bed, it won't keep you up. Well, I got to tell you something. I've been eating ice cream before bed for the better part of 67 years, and it's never caused me to stay awake.
Coffee doesn't even cause me to stay awake. So
Me either.
So, okay, let me see some other interesting questions. Well, that was such a long question. I couldn't.
Okay, cut it down. Let's go. Do some editing.
Okay, all right. Do you think Americans are getting as particular as Europeans, particularly the French, about notions about classic food dishes?
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry. No, we're not.
Yeah, no,
And by the way, I don't think that being tied to 6 mother sauces necessarily makes you a great cuisine. French cuisine can be great. What we think of as French cuisine is actually French haute cuisine. There are many kinds of French cuisine. Frankly, my favorite kind of French cuisine is Mediterranean cuisine. It's, what you find in Marseille. But no, we're not, nor will we ever be as rigid about the definition of recipes.
Let's see. No, those are the questions.
And I just managed to pour some water down my chin.
Oh, okay. Oh, you cook?
Yes, I do.
Consider yourself a good cook, or do you do a lot of?
I think I'm a terrific amateur cook that is a million miles from being a chef.
Well,
I still, after cooking for many years, I still have to cut open the side of that tenderloin to see if it's done. Unlike chefs who, I remember we were interviewing the owner of Louis Miller's Barbecue, Louis' son, Bobby, who has since passed, and now his son, Wayne, has the place. But it's like an 80-year-old barbecue joint, best barbecue I've ever had in my life. And at one point, Guy is talking to him, and we're in front of a smoker, and the pit, it was, 80-year-old pit. And all of a sudden, Bobby reaches behind him, opens the lid, and moves different briskets to different places. And I said, how did you know what needed what? He said, I know. That's the difference between a chef and a cook. I took up cooking because in Germany, when you rent an apartment, it doesn't come with a kitchen. There's a room, but there's no appliances, there's no furniture. Now, if it's there, you can buy it from the previous renter. But when I moved to Germany, I moved into a brand new apartment, went to IKEA, or however we say it these days, and got everything. Spent a lot of money. Then the world ended. I ended up moving to Budapest. Anyway, the bottom line is this. I realized when I left that apartment in Frankfurt after, I don't know, 4 years, that I had never once cooked anything in that kitchen. I'd been on the road, like 330 days a year. When I got back to the States after my tour overseas, I thought to myself, maybe I should cook something. And I started cooking some stuff, and it turned out that I really enjoy doing it. I am not a chef. I am, however, fearless. I will invite you to my house and make you a dish I've never made before, and then find out how'd I do. I don't remember what I did, something like that the other day. Turned out okay. But I very much love cooking. And you gotta not be nuts about it. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you won't. But there's just something special. I mean, I made a tenderloin 2 days ago, which is the simplest thing in the world to make. You take a hunk of beef, you rub it with salt, pepper, and garlic, you put it in a 500-degree oven, you wait a while, you take it out, you're a genius. The ability to do that and eat something nice at the end of the day is wonderful.
Okay, let's see. I think this is going to be the last question because I think it's almost 8 o'clock now.
Well, in some parts of the country, it's almost 11.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I forget we're not okay. And actually, I think we have covered the waterfront as far as the questions that I have here.
Great.
I have a hugely long question. You want me to try that one?
Go for it. We got technically, I think, 2.5 minutes.
Okay. How did you decide what recipes to include in your, what it is a series of questions, and it looks like one. How did you decide what recipes to include? And are garlic festivals, cranberry festivals, wine festivals, cheese festivals, Greek festivals, dumplings, Mediterranean, African, vegan, beer, whiskey? Just talk about any of the festivals that you know anything about.
Festivals are wonderful. Look, as I said in my prepared remarks, food brings us together. It gives us an opportunity to share experiences and, frankly, to meet other people. You come to a food festival, you're there with like-minded people. I mean, you don't go to a wine festival if you're the leader of the Temperance Society. So right off the bat, it's a delightful experience. And let's be clear, at least for me, one of the great things about these festivals is going from booth to booth to booth and tasting this and tasting that. And if you cook, getting inspiration for how to do things, I think that's wonderful. As for how I picked the recipes, some of it was pragmatism. Not every restaurant that has a particularly important recipe is going to give it away. So the first cutoff was who would give me a recipe. The second cutoff was to try to find recipes that were most representative of the point of each chapter. I mean, the barbecue recipe has 6 ingredients, but it's the white sauce recipe from Big Bob Gibson's Barbecue in Alabama, which has become such an unbelievably important element of the barbecue world, as the current owner of the place, he's in the family. I'm going to botch his name. I think it's Chris Lilly. If it's not, I'm sorry. Told me he's shocked to find that particular sauce all over the country. Look, there were a couple of places where I really couldn't get a recipe. For example, the lox and eggs recipe is mine. I'm 67 years old. I'm a New York Jew. I've been eating lox and eggs since I was old enough to chew. Believe me, I can make lox and eggs. So that you got that one from me. But there were like the taquito recipe in the book is for potato-filled taquitos, which are terrific. They're not for the beef-filled taquitos, beef or pork, the meat-filled taquitos that are best known at this restaurant, which is El Indio in San Diego, because the lovely woman who owns the place wasn't going to give away the secret spice recipe, and I get that. Basically, I looked for a representative recipe for each chapter.
Good. Okay. I think I don't think there's any more questions. Let me look and see if I've missed any. 5 minutes more for questions. Okay, thank you, Kim, because I'm complete. Um, can you define or describe a diner for this native Californian?
Okay. In its earliest description, and diners have evolved almost to the point of that Supreme Court justice's definition of pornography. I know it when I see it, but diners originally were restaurants that had a counter, and the cooking was done in full view of the people at the counter. It was homemade food and, as much as possible, a broad menu. Diners have since expanded to the point where you can get martinis at diners now. But the bottom line is homemade food, a lot of it, reasonable price. And if it don't have a counter, it ain't a diner.
And it isn't fancy.
No, most diners are not fancy. There's the Americana diner, I guess named after my book, here in New Jersey, which is all hoity-toity, but they've managed to still feel like a diner. It's, you go in, you know you're going to get a multi-page menu of home cooking favorites, like chicken pot pie or roast beef, or any diner in New Jersey that does not have bagels and lox is not a diner. There's just stuff. There's going to be a Greek salad. There's going to be pie. There may be some weird stuff that only your grandmother made, like rice pudding. That's a diner.
Okay, they're telling me to wrap it up here. So that was really great, David, and thank you very much for making a wonderful.
Thank you guys for inviting me. It's been a delight.
Oh yeah, this has been a lot of fun. This was a wonderful presentation and an appetizer for us to entice people into the rest of the book festival. Thank you, festival attendees, for now. I think, oh good, all right. Thank you, festival attendees, for your support. We are here because of you. I would like to thank our hardworking committee members and the Jewish Federation staff, our team of advanced readers, our literary circle members, our community partners throughout the region, and the Jewish Book Council. I would also like to thank our behind the scenes wizard, Jake Tavel. Oh my goodness, Jake, thank you so much. Whose expertise in all things virtual is invaluable. David Page's book can be purchased from our official partner and bookseller, Vroman's Bookstore. And David has kindly autographed some book plates that can be included with your purchase. Please join us for upcoming events. This Sunday, October 31st, is Admiral Ami Ayalon, who will be talking about his memoir, Friendly Fire, and why he believes the two-state solution is vital to Israel's security. And on Tuesday, November 2nd at 7 p.m., Mitchell James Kaplan will talk about his book, Rhapsody, set in the time of the New York Jazz Age. Both of these events are virtual, so please be sure to sign up on the Jewish Federation website. Thank you again, everybody. Have a good evening. Thank you, David. You were really fascinating. Shalom.